Her hand closed around a stranger's sleeve before her brain caught up with her. "Pick me," Alisha Ray whispered into the dark of the hallway. Not her. The man turned. Alicia's stomach dropped through the floor. It wasn't Julian. It wasn't her boss at all. The man in front of her had the same dark suit, the same broad shoulders silhouetted against the hallway light, but a stranger's face, jaw rough with a day of stubble, eyes pale gray and startled. He looked at her the way you'd look at someone who just set off a fire alarm by accident. "I'm sorry," Alisha managed. "I thought you were someone else." "Clearly," he said, not unkindly, almost amused. "Should I ask who I almost got picked instead of?" "Before we get into it, we'd love to know where you're watching from tonight. Drop in the comments. And if you've ever said the exact right thing to the exact wrong person, you already know where this is going." 6 hours earlier, Alisha had ironed the same navy dress 3 times, trying to get the crease of the collar to lie flat, telling herself this was just another work event. It wasn't. Tonight, her boss of 3 years was getting engaged, and some small, stubborn part of her still believed that if she just showed up looking right, saying nothing wrong, something might shift. It didn't shift. It broke. The Cole Whitfield engagement party was being held in a ballroom on the 40th floor of a building Alisha had never been inside, despite working 60 hours a week for the man who partly owned it. Julian Ashford ran Ashford Capital the way other men ran marathons, relentlessly, with a finish line always just visible and always moving. Alisha had been his executive assistant for 3 years, which in practical terms meant she knew his coffee order, his mother's birthday, the names of his allergies, and the exact tone of voice that meant handle this before I have to. What she didn't know, until tonight, was Sophie Whitfield's face. She'd only ever been a name on a calendar invite. Dinner with S's parents in town. A woman who existed in Julian's life the way a locked door exists in a house. Present. Unremarkable. Until you actually have to walk past it every day for 3 years and wonder what's on the other side. Alisha told herself she was going to the party to be professional. To smile, shake hands, leave early. She told herself this in the mirror, in the elevator, in the ladies' room where she reapplied lipstick that didn't need reapplying. She did not tell herself the truth, which was that some version of her had been rehearsing a different ending to tonight for longer than she wanted to admit. One where Julian looked up from across the room, and something in his face changed, and none of this engagement had ever needed to happen at all. It was a stupid thing to want. She knew that, knowing it didn't make it go away. By 10 o'clock, 3 glasses of champagne she wasn't used to drinking had done exactly what champagne does to bad ideas. Made them feel briefly, dangerously reasonable. She'd watched Julian across the ballroom with his hand at the small of Sophie's back, laughing at something, easy and lit up in a way she'd cataloged in her head for years as the good version of him. The one she got maybe twice a quarter, always for other people. She'd slipped out toward the private hallway that led to the coat check, telling herself she needed air. She found Julian's silhouette instead. Dark suit, broad shoulders, standing half in shadow near the hall's far end, and something in her simply gave out. She crossed the hallway. She grabbed his sleeve. She said the sentence she'd been carrying around unspoken for 3 years, and for 1 full second, saying it felt like setting something down she'd been holding too long. Then he turned around, and it wasn't Julian. It was a man she'd never seen in her life. To understand how Alisha Ray ended up whispering a confession to a stranger, you have to understand the 3 years that came before it. She'd taken the assistant job at 26, fresh off a communications degree and a breakup that left her with more caution than confidence. Julian Ashford interviewed her himself, which she later learned he never did for junior hires, and asked her exactly one unusual question. What's something you're good at that nobody ever thanks you for? Making people's lives run smoother without them noticing I did it, she'd said. It was true. It was also, she'd realized years later, the exact skill set that would let a man like Julian rely on her completely while never once wondering what she needed in return. The job became her whole architecture. She learned his patterns the way you learn a language by immersion. The silences that meant don't interrupt, the 2-minute warnings before a meeting that meant bring coffee. No words. The birthday of a mother he never visited but always sent flowers to, guilt dressed as devotion. She was good at the job. She was, if she was honest, better at the job than almost anything else in her life, because the job asked her to disappear into usefulness, and disappearing into usefulness had always come naturally to her. Somewhere in year 2, usefulness had started to feel like intimacy. She told herself it wasn't. That noticing when he was too stressed to eat, that remembering his father's death anniversary before his own calendar did, that staying past midnight during the merger without being asked, was just being good at her job. But she'd stopped being able to draw the line between I take care of this because it's my job and I take care of this because it's him, and once that line disappears, it doesn't come back easily. Julian never crossed anything. He was never inappropriate, never flirtatious in a way she could point to and name. That was almost the cruelest part. He simply relied on her so completely, so constantly, that reliance started to feel, from the inside, like something it was never going to become. She found out about Sophie the way she found out about most things in Julian's life, secondhand, through his calendar. Dinner, 7 p.m., the usual place. She'd stared at that line for a full minute before opening the next email. By the time the engagement was announced, Alisha had spent 11 months quietly, privately grieving something she never had the right to grieve because it had never technically existed. Tonight was supposed to be the night she stopped. Instead, it became the night she grabbed a stranger's arm in a dark hallway and said the truest sentence she'd said in 3 years to the one man in the building who had absolutely nothing to do with any of it. His name, she would learn a few minutes later, was Bruce Cole. And the reason Alisha had never seen his face before, despite 3 years spent memorizing everyone who mattered in Julian's orbit, was that Bruce wasn't supposed to be at this party at all. I should go, Alisha said, already backing away, already calculating how fast she could reach the elevator without anyone in the ballroom clocking her exit. I'm so sorry. I really did think you were. Julian, Bruce said. Not a question. Alisha stopped. How did you? Wild guess. A faint, dry, almost smile. Dark suit, tall, standing near the coat, check like he owns the building. It's not exactly a hard sketch to draw around here. You know him. Unfortunately. Bruce leaned back against the wall, hands in his pockets, in no apparent hurry to end the conversation, which unsettled her more than if he'd laughed and walked off. He's marrying my half-brother's ex-fiance's best friend, if you want the family tree. It's a small, incestuous little circle of people who all went to the same 3 prep schools. I try to avoid it when I can. But you're here. I wasn't invited, Bruce said, matter of fact. No shame in it. My father is. He couldn't come. I said I'd show my face for an hour, so nobody could say the Coles snubbed the Ashfords. He tilted his head slightly. Your turn. Who's Julian to you, that you had a sentence like that saved up for him? Alisha felt her face go hot in a way 3 glasses of champagne weren't responsible for. It's not. I work for him. I'm his assistant. It's complicated and also extremely not complicated, which is somehow worse. That checks out, Bruce said. The good ones usually are. I really am sorry, she said again, meaning it more the second time. That's not a sentence anyone should have to catch by accident. I've caught worse things by accident tonight, Bruce said. At least yours was honest. He studied her for a second, not unkindly, the way you'd look at someone you were deciding whether to trust with a follow-up question. For what it's worth, whatever you were about to say to him, you should probably say it to someone who's actually listening, not the back of a stranger's jacket. It should have felt like a dismissal. It didn't. It felt, unaccountably, like the first honest thing anyone had said to her all night. I don't even know your name, she said. Bruce, he said. Cole. And before you ask, no, not the fun branch of the family. The one that got asked to leave quietly a long time ago and never really came back. They ended up on a service balcony 2 floors down, one that Bruce seemed to know about with the specific ease of someone who'd spent a childhood learning every exit in every building his family owned or half-owned. The city noise was duller out there, softened by height and glass. Alicia's heels weren't built for standing on concrete, and she didn't care. You said you got asked to leave quietly, she said. That's a strange thing to say about your own family. It's a strange family. Bruce looked out over the skyline instead of at her, which made it easier, somehow, for both of them to keep talking. My father built half this city's hotel chain with his first wife. I'm the son from the second one, the one that happened fast and ended faster and got discussed at family dinners like a scheduling error nobody wanted to own. He said it flatly. No visible bid for sympathy, which made it land harder than if he'd tried for one. I spent most of my 20s proving I didn't need the family name. Built my own thing. Doesn't come up at parties like this, because I don't usually go to parties like this. Then why tonight? Told you. My father couldn't come. Somebody had to sit in the empty chair, so the Ashfords didn't start counting who did and didn't show up. A faint, humorless huff of breath. Turns out I'm still useful for exactly one thing to that family. Occupying a seat. Alisha turned that over, recognizing something in it she hadn't expected to recognize. That sounds familiar. Does it? I'm useful for exactly one thing to my boss, she said, before she could stop herself. Making his life easier. I've spent 3 years being extremely good at a job that apparently also came with feelings I never got permission to have. The champagne, or the height, or the stranger's face that wasn't asking her to perform anything. One of them was making her say more than she'd said out loud to anyone in 3 years. I thought if I was just useful enough, eventually he'd notice there was a person attached to the usefulness. He got engaged instead, and I got so used to being the reliable one that I didn't know what to do with wanting something back. So tonight, I just grabbed the nearest suit and said out loud, "To you, I really am sorry." "Stop apologizing," Bruce said, not sharply, but firm enough to land. "You said something true out loud for the first time in 3 years, from what it sounds like. That's not a crime. It's just a bad aim." Alisha almost laughed. It surprised her coming out. Bad aim. Career-defining bad aim, Bruce agreed. But not the worst thing that's happened at this party. That distinction still belongs to my father's second wife's assessment of the shrimp cocktail, which she delivered to the caterer at Volume. This time Alisha did laugh, and it felt like something loosening in her chest that had been tight for longer than tonight. Monday morning, Alicia's desk phone was already blinking when she walked in, and Julian's office door was open in a specific way that meant come in immediately, don't knock. "There's a rumor," Julian said, without looking up from his screen, "that you made a scene in the east hallway on Saturday." Alicia's stomach turned to ice. "A scene? Sophie's cousin says you grabbed some man's arm and said something about wanting him to pick you." Julian finally looked up, and his expression wasn't angry, which was somehow worse. It was mildly, professionally curious, the way he'd look at an anomaly in a spreadsheet. "I assume there's context I'm missing." "You were the context," Alisha thought, and said nothing, because saying it now, in this office, with this version of him looking at her like a scheduling irregularity, would cost her something she couldn't afford to lose on a Monday morning. "It was a misunderstanding," she said instead, proud of how even her voice came out. "I'd had too much champagne, and I mistook someone for someone else at a party where I frankly didn't know very many faces. It's embarrassing. It's not a work issue. It's a work issue if Sophie's family is asking about it," Julian said, already turning back to his screen, already 3 thoughts past this conversation. "Just be more careful at these things. Image matters more than usual right now. Image matters more than usual right now." 3 years, and that was the sentence she got. Not "are you okay?" Not "who was he?" Not even real curiosity about the woman who'd organized his entire professional existence for 3 years, suddenly grabbing a stranger's arm and confessing something in a hallway. Just a note about optics, filed and closed. Alisha walked back to her desk and sat very still for a moment, staring at the blinking cursor on an email she couldn't remember starting. Something had gone quiet in her that she realized, sitting there, had actually been loud for a very long time. She just hadn't been able to hear it over the sound of being useful. Her phone buzzed. A text from a number she didn't recognize. "This is Bruce. Got your number from the RSVP list, which I'm fairly sure is a mild federal crime. Wanted to check the fallout wasn't too bad. Also wanted to say the shrimp cocktail woman has now filed an official complaint. There is precedent for surviving embarrassment in this family." Alisha found herself smiling at her desk for the first time all morning. They started meeting for coffee, which neither of them called anything at first. Bruce ran a small architecture firm out of a converted warehouse that smelled like cut wood and fresh coffee, refurbishing old buildings instead of tearing them down, a detail Alisha noticed and didn't mention out loud, though it struck her as exactly the kind of thing that would matter to a man raised to feel disposable in his own family. "You could have told your family's whole circle who I actually grabbed that night," Alisha said one afternoon, watching him sketch elevations on a drafting table with the same unhurried patience he seemed to bring to everything. "It would have been easy gossip. Free entertainment at my expense. Wasn't my story to hand out, Bruce said, not looking up from the page. Whatever you meant by it, it was yours, not a party favor. Most people would have used it anyway. I'm not most people at these things, he said. Told you. I show up, occupy the seat, leave. I don't usually stay long enough to collect anything worth using against someone. He set his pencil down and looked at her properly. You keep waiting for me to want something back for this. I don't. I just think you said something true to the wrong person, and I'd rather be the kind of person you can say true things to on purpose. It was the most he'd said about what any of this was, and he said it without drama, the way he seemed to say everything, plainly, like a fact he'd already made peace with before offering it to her. Alisha didn't answer right away. She was busy noticing that for the first time in longer than she could name, she wasn't performing usefulness for anyone in the room. She was just there. I don't know how to do this without it being about proving something, she admitted finally. 3 years of being useful enough. I don't actually know what wanting something is supposed to be. The email arrived on a Thursday. Sophie forwarded a photo someone had taken at the engagement party. Alisha, half visible in the hallway, hand on a strange man's sleeve, with a single line to Julian. Is this something I should know about? Julian called Alisha into his office that afternoon, and this time the door didn't stay open. You've been distracted, he said, without preamble. Later starts. Leaving on time. I need to know if something is going on that I should be aware of. There isn't anything going on that affects my work, Alisha said, and it was true, and she was tired, suddenly and completely, of having to prove it was true. Sophie's asking questions about a photo from the party, Julian said. About you. About whatever that was in the hallway. And there it was, the opening she'd spent 3 years too careful to take. Alisha felt something in her chest go very still and very clear, the way water goes still right before it's about to move. That was a mistake, she said. I grabbed the wrong man's arm because I'd spent 3 years hoping you'd eventually notice there was a person attached to the assistant, and I got tired of waiting for you to look up. That's the whole story. It has nothing to do with my work, and it has even less to do with you now, because I've spent the last few weeks talking to someone who actually listens when I say something true. Her voice didn't shake. She was almost surprised by that. You don't have to worry about optics anymore, Julian. I quit. Julian blinked, genuinely startled for the first time in 3 years of working together. Alisha, you're going to be fine, she said, and meant it, without bitterness, the way you mean something you've already grieved and finished grieving. You always are. I just don't need to be the reason for it anymore. She walked out of his office for the last time without looking back, and the strangest part was how light it felt, like setting down a bag she hadn't realized she'd been carrying for 3 years. She didn't call Bruce that day. She went home instead, sat on her apartment floor with a cup of tea going cold beside her, and let herself actually feel the thing she'd been organizing her whole adult life around outrunning. Not heartbreak, exactly, because you can't break something that was never really whole to begin with. Something closer to relief with grief still caught in its teeth. She thought about the version of herself who'd ironed a navy dress 3 times for a man who filed her confession under optics. She thought about 3 years of being so good at disappearing into usefulness that she'd nearly missed the difference between being needed and being wanted. She thought about Bruce, who'd never once asked her to be useful for anything, who'd told her, without dressing it up, that he wasn't interested in collecting what she'd accidentally handed him in a hallway, who occupied his own family's empty chairs and never once made her feel like she was filling one for him. She realized, sitting there, that she'd spent 3 years afraid of wanting something openly, because wanting things out loud had never once been safe with Julian. It had never occurred to her that it might simply be safe with someone else, that the wanting itself wasn't the problem. The audience had been. 2 weeks passed. She started freelancing, communications work, the kind that let her build something instead of just smoothing someone else's path. She didn't reach out to Bruce, not because she didn't want to, but because for the first time in years she wanted to arrive somewhere as a whole person, not a useful one, not a rescued one, just herself, choosing on purpose. She found him at the warehouse on a Saturday, unannounced, the way he'd shown up in her life in the first place, a little sideways, without ceremony. Bruce looked up from the drafting table when the door opened, and something in his face went carefully neutral, like a man bracing for a conversation he'd already rehearsed the ending to and didn't like. I quit my job, Alisha said, before he could say anything. 3 weeks ago. I've been freelancing. I didn't call you because I needed to figure out if I actually wanted this, or if I just wanted anyone who'd catch me after Julian didn't. She crossed the room and stopped in front of the drafting table, in front of him. I know now. It's not about being caught. I'm not falling toward you. I'm choosing you. On purpose. With my eyes open this time, and nobody's name in my mouth but yours. Bruce set his pencil down slowly. You came all the way here to correct the aim. I came all the way here, Alisha said, to say it to the right man. Pick me, she said again, quieter this time. No champagne in her voice to blame it on. No dark hallway to hide the words in. Not the version of me that was still hoping someone else would. Bruce came around the drafting table without hurrying, the same unhurried patience he brought to everything that mattered to him, and said the only thing that needed saying. Already did, he said, the night you got the name wrong and the truth right. And that brings our story to a close. Before we go, a gentle reminder that this story is fictional, created for entertainment, but the feeling behind it is real. Sometimes the truest thing we say all year comes out at the worst possible moment, to the wrong person entirely. And sometimes that accident is the only reason we ever say it at all. What moment in this story hit you hardest? Tell us in the comments. If this one moved you, like it, share it with someone who still believes in getting a second chance to say the right thing to the right person, and subscribe for more stories like this one. Thank you for being here with us. We'll see you in the next story.